Welcome to the deep dive. Today, you, the listener, and I are stepping firmly into the shoes of commercial property developers.
It is quite a complex pair of shoes to fill.
Yeah, exactly. We are embarking on a massive, hypothetical UK construction project. Let's picture a £100 million mixed-use tower right in the heart of the major city.
A real landmark asset.
Right. But before we even think about breaking ground or, pouring a single cubic yard of concrete, we have to talk about the invisible architecture of the project.
The legal architecture.
Yes. We need to talk about how we protect our colossal investment and avoid total financial disaster when the inevitable site issues arise. To help us navigate this highly complex landscape, I am sitting down with my go-to senior construction consultant.
Great to be here. We have definitely got our work cut out for us today.
We really do. We've been meticulously working our way through a towering stack of incredibly detailed source material from the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, or RICS, covering construction security and performance documents.
It is a dense read, but absolutely vital.
Our mission for this deep dive is to demystify the essential legal and financial mechanisms used to manage risk in the UK construction industry. We are going to examine how to insulate our funders, how to strictly secure our contractors' performance, and, crucially, how to keep the absolute lifeblood of the industry cash flow pumping through the supply chain.
That is the ultimate goal.
Okay, let's unpack this. When looking at the sheer volume of contracts on a major commercial build, the web of liability seems almost impossibly tangled.
Oh, it's a phenomenal paper mountain. As a developer on a project of this scale, you are never just signing a single, straightforward contract with a builder and hoping for the best.
Right, it's never just one piece of paper.
Exactly. You are effectively the center of a massive, multi-tiered commercial ecosystem. You have your funders, the institutional banks putting up the capital, you have your main contractor, your tiers of professional consultants like lead architects, mechanical and electrical engineers.
Structural engineers.
Right, structural engineers. And below them, you have an incredibly fragmented supply chain of specialized subcontractors. And eventually, on the other end, you have the purchasers or the blue-chip commercial tenants who will actually occupy the floors of this tower.
So the foundational legal challenge we have to address first, before any physical work begins, is how all these disparate parties legally relate to one another when a catastrophic failure occurs.
Precisely.
And reading through the RICS materials, that brings up a glaring dilemma. Let's run a hypothetical scenario based on these documents. We hire a Tier 1 main contractor, and they bring in a specialist structural engineer.
Okay, standard setup.
The tower gets finished. Our anchor tenant, say, a massive tech firm taking up 10 floors, moves in. 3 years later, there's a major structural failure in the roof design, and the tech firm's server rooms are completely flooded.
Millions in damages.
Exactly. From a common-sense perspective, that tenant should just sue the structural engineer who messed up the design. But standard contract law throws a massive wrench into that, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Under standard English contract law, the tenant cannot simply sue the engineer. This roadblock is due to a fundamental, centuries-old legal concept called the doctrine of privity of contract.
Privity.
Yes. The doctrine of privity dictates that if party A, in this case, you, the developer, and party, the structural engineer, have a contract, then party C, your tech firm tenant, or even your lending bank, is legally considered a non-party.
So because that tenant didn't put their signature on our specific appointment contract with the engineer, they're shut out.
Completely shut out. They cannot extract any benefit from it, and they certainly cannot sue for a breach of its terms. There is an invisible wall of privity completely blocking them. And trying to recover those purely economic losses outside of a contract, relying on something like the law of tort or negligence, is notoriously difficult in English commercial law.
That makes the privity wall incredibly dangerous for our commercial viability. If our tenants and our banks are left financially exposed to defective work, they simply won't sign leases.
And the banks won't release the funds.
Right. So to bridge that gap, the RICS documents spend a lot of time on collateral warranties. As I understand it, a collateral warranty is essentially a completely new parallel contract.
It is.
It's a legally binding agreement created directly between the party who actually performed the work, the structural engineer, and the interested third party, like our tech tenant or our funder. The engineer explicitly warrants to that third party that they have complied with their original design contract.
You've hit the nail on the head. It manufactures that missing contractual link. By executing a collateral warranty, the third party now has a direct contractual line of sight to sue the consultant or contractor if they suffer a loss due to defective design or poor workmanship. It is the traditional, widely accepted fix to the privity problem.
And while the tenants need that protection for their physical space, the RICS material highlights that our funders, the banks, bankrolling this £100 million tower demand an entirely different tier of protection in their collateral warranties.
Yes, they require something called step-in rights.
Right. Step-in rights.
It is a non-negotiable requirement for development finance. If we connect this to the bigger picture, a bank's primary nightmare is a half-finished commercial building. If you, the developer, run out of runway and go insolvent halfway through the structural framing, the project immediately grinds to a halt.
Because a concrete shell has virtually no resale value to a bank looking to recoup its massive loan.
Exactly. Step-in rights are a mechanism embedded in the funder's collateral warranty that allows the bank, or a corporate nominee of the bank, to legally step into your shoes as the developer. They take over the administration of the existing contracts, bypassing your insolvency to ensure the contractors keep building and the asset gets completed.
But the bank can't just forcefully take the wheel and ignore the financial realities on the ground, right? The RICS guide notes that to exercise those step-in rights, the funder generally has to cure any outstanding debt first.
Yes, that is the catch.
They have to pay the contractors whatever you, the insolvent developer, already owed them before they can force them to continue working.
That is the crucial commercial trade-off. The contractors agree to stay on the job for a new master, but only if they are made entirely whole on their outstanding invoices.
Navigating step-in rights makes sense, but looking at the sheer logistics of this on a mega project gives me a headache.
Yeah.
If we have dozens of professional consultants, a massive web of subcontractors, and eventually dozens of corporate tenants.
You are talking about a mountain of paperwork.
Exactly. Drafting, circulating, negotiating, and tracking physical signatures for hundreds of individual collateral warranties. It seems like a staggering administrative burden that could delay a project for months.
It frequently does.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The sources detail a legislative shortcut designed to bypass this mountain of paperwork entirely.
Ah, yes. The Contracts Rights of Third Parties Act 1999, universally referred to in the industry as the TPR Act.
The TPR Act.
This legislation was a watershed moment because it effectively engineered a statutory exception to the rigid doctrine of privity we discussed earlier. It allows a third party to enforce the terms of a contract without ever needing a separate, physically signed collateral warranty document.
I read through the mechanics of how the TPR Act is activated, and it completely streamlines the process.
Right.
Instead of drafting a new contract for every tenant, our original underlying contract with the architect or the main contractor will explicitly contain a pre-agreed schedule of third-party rights.
Correct.
These rights are earmarked for specific classes of people like future tenants or funders. Then, when our tech firm signs their lease, we, as the developer, simply serve a formal unilateral notice to the architect stating that this specific tenant now possesses those predefined rights.
The notice acts as the trigger.
Right. No back-and-forth negotiation, no chasing wedding signatures across multiple firms.
Exactly. It replaces a complex multilateral negotiation with a simple unilateral administrative notice. It drastically reduces legal fees and administrative friction. However, you will find that the commercial real estate market can be quite conservative.
How so?
Well, while TPR notices are highly efficient, some traditional institutional funders still aggressively prefer the tangible comfort of a bespoke hard copy collateral warranty sitting in their vault.
So they want the physical paper just for peace of mind.
Exactly.
Moving from the paperwork to the actual risk allocation, contractors and consultants aren't just going to absorb unlimited third-party liability without a fight. If we force them to grant these rights to our tenants and funders, they're going to demand strict limitations on their financial exposure.
They absolutely will.
The RICS documents highlight a specific defense mechanism called the net contribution clause, and it completely shifts the risk profile for us as developers.
It is perhaps the most heavily negotiated clause in these security documents. To understand its impact, we have to look at how liability normally functions. In construction, defects are rarely caused by a single isolated mistake. Let's say a major structural flaw is discovered, and forensic analysis proves it was a three-way failure.
Okay.
The architect's design was flawed, the structural engineer miscalculated the load, and the project manager completely failed to catch the errors during site inspections. They are jointly responsible.
So under normal joint and several liability, our tenant could look at those three at-fault parties, realize the structural engineer and the project manager recently went bankrupt and decide to sue the architect for 100% of the financial damages.
Yes.
The architect takes the full hit for everyone's mistakes simply because they are the last firm standing with a solvent insurance policy.
That is the harsh reality of joint and several liability. The solvent party bears the risk of their co-defendant's insolvency. But a net contribution clause fundamentally rewrites that rule.
How does it change things?
It explicitly states that the architect's liability to the third party is capped strictly at the proportion of the loss that a court or tribunal would consider just and equitable for their specific contribution to the problem.
Which means if a court determines the architect was only 33% responsible for the design failure, our tenant can only recover 33% of their damages from that architect.
Precisely.
Even if the other two at-fault firms are bankrupt, the tenant, or us as the developer, has to absorb the remaining 67% loss. That is a brutal reality check regarding how risk is truly distributed when multiple parties fail.
It forces the developer and the third parties to carry the insolvency risk of the broader project team, rather than dumping it all on the one solvent consultant. Alongside that, you also have the equivalent rights of defense clause.
Right, I saw that in the reading.
This ensures the consultant providing the warranty can rely on any limitation of liability they negotiated in their original contract. If the structural engineer capped their total project liability at £10 million in their contract with you, they can deploy that exact same £10 million cap to defend themselves against a massive claim from your tech tenant.
So they do not take on greater liability to the third party than they originally accepted from the developer.
Exactly.
That makes perfect commercial sense. It prevents the warranty from becoming a backdoor to unlimited liability. There's another detail in the sources regarding liability that centers entirely on how these documents are physically signed or executed.
The execution format.
Yes, I found this fascinating because the execution format literally dictates the lifespan of the legal protection. According to the RICS material, if we execute these contracts as a simple contract underhand, which basically just requires a standard authorized signature, the statutory limitation period for us to bring a claim for a breach is capped at 6 years from the date of the breach.
Which, in the context of a massive commercial tower, is an incredibly short window. Major structural defects, latent flaws in the foundation, or slow-moving water ingress issues often don't manifest visually until 8, 10, or sometimes 11 years after practical completion.
Exactly, which is why the guide emphasizes that developers and funders will relentlessly insist these security documents are executed as a deed.
Yes.
Executing a document as a deed requires a higher level of corporate formality, historically involving a company's seal, but today usually requiring the signatures of 2 statutory directors, or a director and a company secretary.
And the payoff for that extra formality is massive.
Right. Executing as a deed automatically extends the legal limitation period from 6 years to 12 years.
Yeah.
Securing a 12-year runway to discover and prosecute latent defects is non-negotiable for an asset of this scale.
It is the absolute industry standard for major works. If a consultant tries to push back and offer only a 6-year liability window under a simple contract, it is an immediate red flag for your funders.
Let's shift our focus from the consultants designing the building to the contractors actually pouring the concrete. The RICS document dives deep into the mechanisms used to guarantee the main contractor's actual performance.
This is where the jargon gets really dense.
It really does. It's a dense soup of financial and legal terminology: conditional bond, on-demand, surety, guarantee. To effectively manage this project, we need to separate these terms. The guide insists the key to understanding all of this is identifying whether a document creates a primary obligation or a secondary obligation.
The terminology is notoriously murky because the title printed at the top of a document rarely reflects its actual legal mechanics. Courts will look at the substance of the agreement. As you noted, the dividing line is the nature of the obligation. Let's start with the more aggressive option, the primary obligation.
Based on the reading, a primary obligation, often called an on-demand bond, means the guarantor, usually a major bank, undertakes an independent obligation to pay us a specific sum of money the moment we demand it in writing.
That's right.
We do not have to prove that the contractor actually breached the contract, and we don't have to prove we suffered a specific financial loss. We simply present the written demand conforming to the bond, and the bank must release the funds.
That is an accurate summary. What's fascinating here is the sheer commercial tension these primary obligations create. On paper, an on-demand bond looks like a developer's absolute dream. It is highly liquid security. but contractors will fiercely resist providing them.
Because of the massive cash flow risk.
Exactly. If you call an on-demand bond, the bank pays you immediately, but the bank then immediately calls in their counter-indemnity against the contractor to recover that cash. The contractor is left severely out of pocket and has to initiate lengthy litigation against you, the developer, to prove your demand was unjustified and get their money back.
So because of this massive cash flow risk to the contractor, true on-demand performance bonds are exceedingly rare in standard UK commercial building contracts.
They are very rare. Which brings us to the industry standard, the secondary obligation.
Okay, under a secondary obligation, which usually takes the form of a guarantee or a default bond, the guarantor's liability is entirely contingent on the underlying contract. We, the developer, have the burden of actively proving that the contractor breached the building contract, and we must formally quantify the financial loss that breach caused us.
Yes.
Only after we prove the default does the guarantor step in to cover the damages. It is a prove-it-first mechanism.
Precisely. It protects the contractor from arbitrary cash grabs by the developer. It ensures the surety only pays out when there is a legitimate, proven failure of performance.
With that primary versus secondary framework established, let's look at the actual toolkit. I'm going to put on my aggressively budget-conscious developer hat for a moment.
I know this hat well.
We need security, but I want to preserve capital. The RICS sources outline parent company guarantees, or PCGs. From a developer's perspective, this looks like the perfect cheap option. We hire a subsidiary contractor, and their wealthy, ultimate holding parent company provides a guarantee, a secondary obligation, promising to see to it that the subsidiary fulfills the contract.
Yes, that is the mechanism.
If the subsidiary fails, the parent company steps in to finish the job or cover our losses, and it essentially costs nothing but administrative legal fees.
It is highly cost-effective, but you are trading financial cost for risk exposure. The critical vulnerability of a parent company guarantee is corporate contagion. You are relying on the financial health of the broader corporate group.
Right.
If your subsidiary contractor goes insolvent due to a massive systemic issue, perhaps aggressive underbidding across multiple projects, there is a high probability the parent company is also facing severe financial distress. If the entire group collapses, as we have seen with catastrophic contractor failures in the past, your PCG is suddenly a worthless piece of paper issued by a bankrupt entity.
That is the ultimate false economy. We save a fraction of a percent on the contract price, but leave the entire £100 million asset exposed to a group-wide insolvency. To actually ring-fence that risk, the guide points us toward bonds.
Yes, bonds.
A bond is provided by an independent, third-party financial institution, usually a bank or a highly rated surety insurance company. It creates an independent pot of money that survives, even if the contractor's entire corporate group is liquidated.
But of course, because it involves a third party assuming risk, it requires a premium payment, which the contractor will aggressively bake into their tender price.
It is a direct commercial cost of the project, but it buys genuine independence.
Exactly. Standard performance bonds in the UK are typically capped at 10% of the original contract sum. They act as a dedicated financial safety net designed to cover the premium costs of terminating a failing contractor, tendering the remaining work, and hiring a replacement firm to cross the finish line.
Beyond the standard 10% performance bond, the RICS material outlines several highly specialized bonds used to target specific financial vulnerabilities during the life cycle of the build. This is where those aggressive on-demand primary obligations actually find a place in the market.
Yes, like advance payment bonds.
Right. If we are building this tower, we might need to hand the contractor a massive upfront payment to secure specialized structural steel or custom curtain wall glazing months before it arrives on site. But handing over millions in unsecured cash is terrifying.
It is.
An advance payment bond is an on-demand instrument the contractor gives us in return. If they take our advance payment and try to use it to plug a financial hole on a completely different project, we instantly call the bond and retrieve our capital without having to prove a complex contractual breach.
It perfectly neutralizes the risk of the contractor using your project as a free overdraft facility.
I also found the mechanics of retention bonds fascinating because they solve a major point of friction. Traditionally, as the developer, we withhold a retention, say, 3%, 5% of every monthly payment, to build a pot of money that incentivizes the contractor to return and fix any defects after the building opens.
Yes, but contractors despise retentions because it strangles their working capital.
Exactly. So a retention bond offers a brilliant commercial compromise. We agree to pay the contractor their full valuation every month, gross, without any retention deduction.
Right.
In exchange, the contractor provides an on-demand retention bond for that 3 to 5% value.
It's a win-win.
The contractor gets their crucial cash flow, and we retain a highly liquid security instrument we can immediately call if they refuse to address post-completion defects.
It is a sophisticated way to utilize financial instruments to ease supply chain friction. The final common bond you will encounter is the tender or bid bond.
Tell me about that one.
Imagine you spend hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal and consultant fees negotiating this mega project with a preferred contractor. Right before signing the final execution copies, the contractor arbitrarily withdraws their bid and walks away. A tender bond is an on-demand security that compensates you for those wasted procurement costs and the severe project delays caused by having to restart the entire tendering process from scratch.
So what does this all mean? We have spent a significant amount of time discussing the legal architecture designed to protect us from the absolute worst-case scenarios, structural collapses, contractor insolvencies, breached contracts.
We have.
But the RICS source material makes a point to emphasize the fundamental operational reality of this industry. It explicitly refers to cash flow as the lifeblood of construction. We can have all the 12-year deeds and performance bonds in the world, but if the monthly cash stops flowing down the tiers of subcontractors, the physical labor on site halts immediately.
That is the reality on the ground.
The documents detail modern mechanisms to protect this lifeblood, starting with escrow accounts. Now, we are used to seeing escrow mechanisms in massive corporate M&A deals or large-scale asset transfers, but utilizing them to secure a construction supply chain introduces some vital trust dynamics.
Escrow in construction is fundamentally about ring-fencing capital. You, the developer, place the allocated construction funds into a dedicated PINC account, typically controlled by an independent escrow agent or law firm. Those funds are strictly released to the main contractor only when certified project milestones are achieved.
Right.
But the absolute critical legal detail here is that the developer must legally hold those funds in trust for the contractor.
Because if those funds are just sitting in a standard commercial account and our development company goes bankrupt, the insolvency liquidators will sweep that account.
Yes, they will.
They will absorb that cash to pay off our secured creditors, and the contractor who actually built the tower becomes just another unsecured creditor fighting for pennies on the pound. Setting it up in trust legally separates that money from our corporate assets, ensuring it survives our potential insolvency and is guaranteed to reach the contractor.
Exactly. It completely isolates the construction capital from the developer's broader corporate risk.
The sources also heavily spotlight project bank accounts, or PBAs. PBAs seem to go a step further than escrow by fundamentally shifting the power dynamic on a construction site.
They really do.
Traditionally, the main contractor holds all the purse strings. We pay the main contractor their massive monthly valuation, and they often use that cash influx to prop up their own corporate balance sheet, squeezing the vulnerable subcontractors on 60 or 90-day payment terms. They effectively use the supply chain as a massive, zero-interest credit facility.
Which is incredibly damaging.
A project bank account structurally dismantles that ability.
It is a radical shift in payment architecture. A PBA is a ring-fenced joint bank account opened by the developer and the main contractor. You pay the monthly certified valuation directly into the PBA. Then, based on a rigorously pre-agreed payment schedule, the bank distributes the funds simultaneously.
So the main contractor gets their slice, but the critical subcontractors, the structural steel firms, the MEP installers, are paid their portion directly from the PDA at the exact same time.
Yes. It entirely removes the main contractor's ability to hoard the cash. It accelerates liquidity down the chain, ensuring the firms actually swinging the hammers and installing the critical infrastructure get paid on time. And because PBAs are also held in trust, those subcontractors are protected even if the main contractor goes suddenly insolvent.
It is arguably the most effective tool the industry has developed to date to protect the most vulnerable tiers of the supply chain and ensure the lifeblood keeps pumping. I think our hypothetical developer notebooks are officially full. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground navigating this RICS material.
We certainly have.
For you, the listener, whether you are structuring the finance for your own mega project or simply trying to understand the complex risk allocation dictating your next commercial site meeting, you now have the blueprint. We know we must circumvent the restrictive wall of privity using either the traditional route of collateral warranties or the streamlined administrative shortcut of third-party rights.
Absolutely essential.
We understand how to strictly secure contractor performance by deploying a calculated mix of parent company guarantees and targeted bonds, always remaining hyper-aware of the crucial commercial difference between a primary on-demand obligation and a secondary prove-it guarantee. And finally, we know that utilizing modern financial architecture like escrow and project bank accounts is essential to protecting the true lifeblood of the project, the cash flow of the supply chain.
It is a highly sophisticated interlocking toolkit. But synthesizing all these sources does leave us with one final, perhaps slightly uncomfortable reality to mull over.
Was that?
Well, we have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how to meticulously draft incredibly complex, aggressive security documents, step-in rights, strict net contribution clauses, on-demand bonds. Every single mechanism we discussed is fundamentally designed to prepare for the absolute worst-case scenarios of corporate insolvency, catastrophic default, and bitter, protracted legal disputes.
That's true.
It inherently raises a deeper question about the industry. How does this deeply adversarial legal framework shape the day-to-day culture of a physical building site? Can true commercial collaboration and integrated teamwork ever genuinely thrive when the entire foundation of the relationship is literally built on a legally binding, heavily financed assumption that the other party is eventually going to fail?
That is a phenomenal, slightly sobering question to leave on. A healthy dose of behavioral philosophy layered over our complex contract law. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Whether you are the institution funding the tower, the engineer designing the load-bearing columns, or the developer trying to keep the entire ecosystem solvent, we hope you can take these insights and apply them to the commercial realities of your own projects. Until next time, keep building.